You get adrenal fatigue when you're hypothyroid for too long because your adrenals overcompensate for the lack of energy. And then you're sensitive to light, sound, and smells. And it's now you're really no fun to be around because everything's annoying you. I mean, what it does is it's a domino effect that has a cascade of a multitude of 30 to 40, 50 symptoms that any dumb doctor will try to be treating the symptom without getting to the root. And that might sound cliche, but the thyroid's like the root of all roots.
Well, Elle Russ, welcome to the Your Body's Way podcast. It is so lovely to chat to you and to finally have you on this podcast because I've been thinking about asking you for a long time. You have no
Thank you.
idea.
So
And I'm
glad
so
to be
glad you said
here.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here. Always happy to talk about this, get the word out, And so, yeah, let's get in there.
Yeah, lovely. So I've got your book here, the Paleo Thyroid Solution. So it's been quite a few years now since you wrote this. You wrote this back in 2016, I can see. So it's like it was
Yep.
published back then. But it's still, gosh, I read it back then and it was brilliant then. And I've read it again in preparation for this
Still
conversation.
holds.
And
Everything still holds.
everything, obviously, everything still holds and it's still just as powerful as it was when I first read it. It's a hefty book. It's like almost 300 pages of
Yeah. And
content.
it could have been 800, that's why I
Mm.
ended up doing a full-fledged online course on this topic because this is so much and I kept going and at a certain point as a writer, as everyone knows who's a writer, you have to just stop, right? And go, okay, you can't deliver 100,000 page, you know what I mean? So yeah, but I packed as much as I could and it's still, a bestseller and it's been incredible and probably due for, a second edition, which would be a monster as well. But yes, everything is
Mm.
still applicable. So it's not like old news or old health strategies. It applies today. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what I love about the way you've written the book and also the way you speak? Because obviously, you have your own podcast, you're on a million podcasts out there, and you're such a great speaker on this topic. And what I love about your approach is that it is so relatable. So you talk about thyroid health in a way that everyone can relate to and everyone can understand. Like it's not just full of medical jargon, you just talk from the heart, you keep it real. And that's what I love about your approach. So, I mean, that's
Thank
why
you.
it's so good to chat to you about this because it's so prevalent, isn't it? Having underactive thyroid, hypothyroidism, it is so prevalent, but we don't even know how prevalent it is because it's not even fully diagnosed in many people. So I'd love to kind of go into all of that today and kind of pick your brains and kind of help people on their journey to discovering what the hell is wrong with them and
Yeah.
if it's thyroid related, right? So first of all, I just wanted to let you know that I don't have an underactive thyroid, but I did have a hyperactive thyroid. So
Uh-huh. We
when I
could
was
talk about that.
25, it
Now,
got
quick question.
on.
Was it considered to be Graves' disease or was it just a temporary ignition of overactiveness?
I think it was just temporary ignition. Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't have the autoimmune version of it. But
Good for you.
basically, this is such an important topic for me because I know my thyroid is my weak link. Like when things go wrong, like it did back then, I know it can kick it off. So this is an important topic for me as well, but for you too, because oh my God, your story is insane about what you went through with your thyroid. So
Okay.
anybody who hasn't heard your story, can you just go into what happened with you and how you got to what you're doing today?
Yeah. So after going through what I went through, I'm not surprised to tell you the fact that all of the best-selling thyroid books have been written by patients because we totally understand how this feels, okay? And we understand how thyroid hormones feels too much, too little. We understand all of the nuance of this because we experience it. So that being said, a lot of health authors, their test becomes their testimony. They suffer through something, and here's why me and others persevered, because no one cares more about your health than you. Not one damn person.
Correct.
Don't you ever believe otherwise, because that's a recipe for death. And so you do have to take your health into your own hands. Hopefully not like I did, where I'm buying like, thyroid hormones from other countries and like trying to dose myself because over 2 dozen endocrinologists and experts in Los Angeles, and I had the best insurance money could buy, could not help me, misdiagnosed me, didn't test me properly, or tested me properly, didn't assess me properly. Maybe tested
Mm,
me properly, assessed me properly, didn't treat me properly. There's all sorts of levels of which a doctor fails due to their level of being uninformed because because they were trained in 1973 outdated thyroid protocols. And by the way, that's the year I was born, everyone. You guys can do the math. That's a long time ago, man. Learned a lot since then. And they're still teaching it. So that's why 99% of the doctors are uninformed. Just to go back to stats so that everyone sees how bad this is. 200 plus million people all over the world have a thyroid problem. But
mm,
in the USA alone, 25 million plus Americans are on just one type of thyroid hormone.
mm,
60% are unaware they even have a problem because they go to the doctor, they take the 1973 test we don't use anymore, can absolutely hurt someone, absolute freaking malpractice, in my opinion, and they still use it. And then a doctor says, like what they said to me when they took the test, well, not your thyroid, just keep eating less and working out more if you're hypo and you gain weight, right?
mhm,
And so it was just a disaster. So I kept being I mean, I would go to doctors like, hey, I'm suffering. And they tested my thyroid, but they didn't test it correctly. So they discounted it and claimed it was something else. So here's what happened. I start to fall apart. I'm 30 years old at the time. My first symptom is I'm getting my period every couple of weeks. Not normal. What I don't know what I'm doing. I know nothing, right? And I'm like young and I'm like, whatever. I go to the doctor. Instead of the doctor asking the question, hey, why would a 30-year-old with perfect gynecological history suddenly be bleeding all the time? Instead of asking that very important, critical question, he was like, he kept giving me the birth control pill. So I'd take a birth control pill, bleed through it. He'd go back, oh, here's another one. So just trying to patch the symptom without asking the question, this shouldn't be happening because that's not the way human bodies work. And no history in my family of this. So had he asked that question, um, and you should ask this question, is that gynecological issues are usually when hormones are off, and the conductor of that, the thing in charge of the production and regulation of your sex hormones is your thyroid gland. So,
mhm.
so again, from here, the master gland, all sorts of cascade issues happen. So then someone thinks you have a hormonal imbalance. They're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. No, it's never going to work. So
Mm,
the thyroid's the master gland because of that, because it's also in charge of of your heart rate, of
mm.
your metabolism. That's why when you're hypothyroid, often you get fat. Some people don't. They have the other symptoms. When you're hyperthyroid, often you can lose weight rapidly, but hyperthyroidism is also hypermetabolic. And a hypermetabolic state can make you crave a lot of food. You're eating more, you're burning more, you're pooping more, all of that stuff, which seems like, oh, that's a dream. I can eat all I want and stay skinny, but it's not. It's horrible for your heart. It's actually exhausting. It's not hyper, where people think like, oh, you must be like running around like hyper display of, you know what I mean, behavior. It's
Yeah,
not
like
that
full of
actually.
energy, like.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's so funny. I had a doctor one time say, I think you're on too much medication. I can tell you're hyper by how fast you speak. I'm like, bitch, have we met? I'm from downtown. I've been talking this
Hello?
fast my whole life. Go talk to my parents. Are you kidding me? Like, that's not a diagnosis of hyperthyroidism because someone's talking fast. Like, you've got to be kidding me. These are the kind of doctors I ran into.
Yeah.
So, hyperthyroidism, much more dangerous because it's in control of your heart rate. And so, therefore, you can have a heart attack. And
Mhm.
you know, just a side note, even though my book's not about hyperthyroidism or Graves' disease, the autoimmune disease that can ignite hyperthyroidism is not only very dangerous, but if it can't be controlled through diet and some medications and other things, the choice sometimes has been in the past to kind of kill the thyroid with sort of
Mhm.
like radioactive iodine, that's what they call it, RAI, and then thus making the person hypo and then putting them on thyroid hormone, which is a safer place to be than your heart going into the emergency
That's
room.
what they did for me. Yeah, I remember it was a really painful injection in my arm, like 'cause it's a very thick needle. And then yeah, they were sending in some radioactive something or whatever. But I was so young at the time, I didn't. really understand what was happening, and I didn't really ask any questions. I just thought, "Oh, it's fine. It's just what you do, really," you know?
I
But
and listen, I didn't either. I kept taking the birth control pill because I was
mhm,
like, "Okay, you know what
yeah,
I mean?"
you put your
I
trust
didn't
into the
know about the
doctors.
thyroid. Yeah,
Mhm,
and then when I questioned, he said, "Your thyroid's fine, just work out more and eat less." And I was like, "I've been working out 2.5 hours a day, eating 1,000 calories,
mm,
like, I know what I'm doing," and gaining weight so rapidly. I'm 5 feet 2 inches tall. To give people perspective, I was probably about maybe 115 pounds at age 30,
mhm.
fit, looking, feeling good, feeling great in my body, and then shot up to 160 pounds
Wow.
while working out and managing every day, uncontrollable weight gain,
Mm,
hair falling out. There's 30, 40 symptoms listed on my website and in my book and
yeah.
everywhere else. And listen, it was so horrific to me to have to be in a major city, first world country, best medical, best doctors. I saw experts and
Mhm,
I went out of pocket. I spent thousands of dollars I didn't have at the time,
mm,
to fix this. But what really did it was me. It was me learning about this. And like you said in the beginning, I love the way you explain it. Well, here's the thing. I hate science and math, guys. Hate it, not interested. Don't send me a spreadsheet. I don't want to look at biology or organic chemistry. You don't need any of that type of skill to understand this. It's theoretical. What I do have is a philosophy degree, which is helpful because you're able to see it in a way that's kind of can be explained in layman's terms. I mean, isn't that really? And so you just need to know it on a theoretical basis. You don't need to know every system of the body and anatomy to understand how this
mhm,
works. And so that's what I offer people is that education. What I had to teach myself, years of suffering, so that you don't have to, because people still run into the uninformed doctors because they are the majority at this point. It's still 99% of them. It's like,
mm,
I shouldn't be a thyroid expert at all.
mhm,
Shouldn't be. It's kind of wrong that I am. Why do I train doctors? I shouldn't be training doctors in anything medical. But I know more than them. It's not to be cocky, it's just I do. But I
yeah.
shouldn't. But they're not
Mm,
teaching it yet. So what are you going to do? I'm the only one teaching it. So it's the doctors that are out there that have patients still complaining. They want to do more. They go above and beyond. Those are usually doctors who are not dictated by insurance companies and have 15 minutes with people. They are usually paid out of pocket. They're going to spend more time with you to investigate, take more risks in practicing medicine with you. So, functional doctors are better than endocrinologists. Alternative integrative physicians are better than endocrinologists. Anti-aging doctors are better than endocrinologists. Doctors of osteopathic medicine are better than the people, endocrinologists, who should be the experts. So,
mm.
just because someone's a functional medicine doctor doesn't mean you're going to win on that and hit it out of the park. It's not like they're going to know what I know. Like, okay, but it's going to be a better shot.
Do you know what? It's such a sensitive topic for so many people because I mean, especially when you tell your story, um, in your book, especially, you go into the emotion that you went through, like the heartache and the frustration and the tears. And I can only imagine that people are going through the same thing because basically we're being given thyroid tests that don't give the full picture of how your thyroid is functioning. So a lot of people have all the symptoms, but then when they get the blood test, it says that the thyroid is completely fine. So I had my thyroid checked when I was pregnant, and they took my TSH, and I had to ask for the antibody tests. I asked specifically for them, and do you know, it felt so awkward asking them because there's almost this frustration on their end. They're like, "Oh God, let me just ask somebody," and then they kind of head off, ask somebody, and it's just not what they're used to. And so I asked the antibody test, and yes, at one of my antibodies was a bit high, but kind of below the threshold. But anyway, it's so I mean, people have to really dig deep, and they have to do their own research, like you said, and they have to actually present the doctor what tests they want. So when
Actually,
it, yeah, go
can I
on,
interject on that one? Because you
yeah,
talked about the emotional thing. I just want to tell everyone. I suffered for 7 years of my 30s. I cried every fucking day, multiple
mm,
times a day. I cried in the shower. I could barely wipe my own ass. Okay, guys, no, it's horrible. You get so fat, you can't even reach
yeah,
certain
yeah,
body parts. It's a horrible. I remember in that moment feeling sad for obese people, even though like I wasn't, but I remember the idea of being like, oh my God, if this is this bad with extra 50 pounds, what in the world would it be like if, every time I bent my leg, I felt like I drank MSG. I had myxedema. It's thickening of the skin. My hair was falling out
Mm,
by the droves. By the way, I have really thick, long hair. It's very curly. I have it in a braid today, but it was falling out in the handfuls. Okay. I mean, it was just absolute disaster. I got horrific acne and I had perfect skin my whole life. I ended up having a polyp in my uterus that I had to get surgically removed thanks to the first doctor kept putting me on the pill telling me my thyroid was fine and I should work out more and eat less. So
mm,
I want to also share a couple of moments. I ran into that doctor like years later. I was in a drugstore in the United States
mm.
called CVS and I walked in and I saw him. He didn't recognize me. He's had hundreds of patients. It was like a decade later. Immediate immediate breakdown. I started horrifically crying and I had to run out to my car, just having a horrible sobbing because I was looking at the person who kept me sick and also cost me a
Right.
lot of money. I had to pay for the own
Yeah.
polyp to come out of my uterus. That's a bill I'd love to send him for 3 grand
Mm,
on that. Like, you know what I mean? So I
yeah.
was looking at the fucking guy who should
Yeah.
have known. And after that day, I was like, oh, I got to do some work. Now, I still always am going to talk some smack about docs, right? Because they really need to get with the program. But at the end of the day, too, there's been doctors that have saved my life, and I love Western medicine. I mean, of course, and I take thyroid hormone, which is created in the lab, and like it's fine. It's so emotional. And here's the thing. It's not just emotional because all of these things are happening to you. It's emotional because you are depressed because you don't have enough of the biologically active thyroid hormone in your brain, where we have more receptors for it than anywhere, and it affects your cognitive abilities. You're
Mm,
starting to feel dumb. You can't find the words. You got brain fog. You can't think. You feel old and stupid and dumb in the brain, or maybe you are chalking it up to being old, or uh-oh, well, my Aunt Nancy went this way. Uh-oh. No, no, no. Maybe it's your thyroid, right? So
mm.
it actually affects your brain. People don't understand. I had a friend one time who didn't understand that the depression was not from just like, oh, I'm getting fat. It's like you really can't access happiness. It's
Yeah. Your brain is literally
horrible.
different.
You can't. I tell people
Mm,
that come to me, when I do private coaching with clients, when they're going through this and they're seriously hypothyroid, it's like, when they start to get better, I always hear this. They go, "Does this shit make you happy?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's because, yeah, it's not like a drug that you would abuse, right? It wouldn't make a normal person happy because they don't, but right. But when you're down so low and you don't have any of these
mm,
neurotransmitters firing, you don't have the juice, the stuff of
mm.
life is T3, which is the thyroid hormone that is what is related to how every single person feels. It's the levels that relate to how metabolism is working, how your brain function, just to uh, highlight that.
Yeah.
It's very rare that a child is born without a thyroid gland. But if
Right.
they are, if it's not attended to immediately and caught immediately, we're talking about intellectual disability for life. It's so
Yeah.
critical to the formation of a child's brain, and also just death if they could just literally die from it too, but their brain
Yeah.
could be seriously affected, their whole development. But same with adult brains as well, and it affects our brains, and that's one thing that people don't realize. And so this is the silent symptom. The other symptoms, yeah, I'm getting fat, acne, I'm bloated, or you know like weird stuff. I mean, I list them on my website. Anyone can go check out the 30-40 symptoms. But the brain stuff, people don't talk about it. It's the Prozac won't work. You're not
Mm,
legit depressed. You just don't have enough of this T3, or the Prozac might work for 3 months, but then it won't, and you need to check the thyroid. And so people are also going on antidepressants and things like that because psychiatrists don't rule out the thyroid first, which again, dum-dums.
mm,
Why would you
mm,
ever give someone a drug to affect their brain or depression level of happiness without looking at the gland that affects it in the first place? Do you see what I'm
right.
saying? So
Yeah.
it's everything. Let's say you have high blood pressure. Oh, but give you high blood. No, you check your thyroid. Oh, those cholesterol labs look really bad, Elle. Guess what? Everyone who's hypothyroid, the cholesterol labs are gonna suck. I
Mm,
had someone who came to me who read all my work. She listened to every interview I've ever done, and she just like was on it, and she ended up figuring it out. And she called me to be like, "Oh my God, I want to be a testimonial." And her cholesterol was 600. Okay, like some
mhm.
people consider 200, 220 high. It was 600. No one could
Wow.
figure out. By the way, she was thin. So she was like, wasn't diet. She was exercising. We said 600 for years and years. It was her thyroid. She didn't have enough T3 to process anything she was eating. It was stagnant. That's going to show up there. So do
Mhm.
you need a statin? Maybe not. Probably not. Do you need high blood pressure? But check the thyroid. Oh, infertility, check the thyroid. Miscarriages, check the thyroid. It
Mm.
manifests itself in women gynecologically often. Same with men. Are you not waking up with erections? Are you having poor recovery from exercise? Are you having broken up, messed up sleep? Looking at DHEA and testosterone isn't the only thing. They're probably
Mhm.
both going to be low if you're hypo as a guy. So as a guy, you don't need testosterone. You get the thyroid in there, thyroid kicks back. Now,
Mm.
the caveat to that with the thyroid and the hormones is if you're a woman and you're 50, if you're a man and you're 60, no amount probably of thyroid hormone regulation is going to kick all the, you know what I mean? Like at that point, it's your choice to supplement, right? With HRT and things like that. So but if you're under that age where obvious fall apart hormone time happens, then you don't usually need exogenous female or male hormones. You just need to get the thyroid back in line and your testosterone will shoot right back up to the proper 30-year-old, 35-year-old level range. So hopefully
Mm.
that makes sense. So it spans all of the health things, and that's why it's considered the master gland, not because of me because you can't live without it because its level of balance and function relates to everything and how you feel and how
Right.
you think. And so I used to be if I were to stop taking my thyroid hormones, let's say, probably maybe a month from now, I would start slurring my words because it would just I would have trouble speaking. I would have trouble pronouncing things. Now, I do podcast, I speak a lot. I'm bound to jumble up my shiz every now and then,
Yes.
of course. But I'm talking about like I would be dyslexically, and I've never been dyslexic, but I would be saying words backwards or not being able to find them, and it would happen a lot. Not remembering numbers, not remembering things like, uh-oh, it's just if you're silently thinking like your mind's going, check your thyroid.
And anybody listening to this and you're just riffing off those symptoms, I'm sure people are just kind of like, oh my gosh, like check, check, check. Like anybody who's listening to this podcast and they have a sneaky feeling that they have something with their thyroid, then that's a really useful part of this conversation. Can I just ask about one symptom though? I've always wondered, I know
Yeah.
this is a really dumb question, but
No.
when they say for the hypothyroid, the moon face, I've always wondered what that actually means because I just picture
Oh,
someone with a
actually,
round face, like, and that's like, what does that
well,
mean?
you know what? Actually, you
Because
can
you don't
almost
mention it in your book, but I feel like you say it in a different
I
way.
don't say that, but you know what? Here's the thing. It just it's a level of bloating. I actually have a picture the other day I showed online where I was like, look at this before shit where I didn't know. Here we go. I'll show you right now this awful photo if I can hold it up. Okay, so you guys can all see me right now, right? If
Right.
you're watching this video,
The
um,
YouTubers, yeah.
and I'm 51 years old, okay? And that's me. Look at my face.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
me at
So
19.
bloated.
Look how, and I'm wearing a huge
Right.
sweatshirt, a male extra large sweatshirt. I'm
Yeah.
so bloated. I am hypothyroid and don't know it. I just feel like, oh, I'm big boned. I guess it's just me.
Right.
These other skinny girls, I'll never be able to, right? I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I think when I look at my life, I went in through periods of probably being hypo and then normal. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
again, hindsight's only, but I thought this was just like who I was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, what the hell
So
is
moon
that? Like,
face would
that's
be
not even
round
like, how
face,
is
like
that?
puffy.
So you right.
Yeah,
It's so
that's how I'd describe it.
it's literally it's called myxedema, myxedema,
Right.
and it is like a thickening of the skin. It's
Okay.
disgusting, by the way. But yeah, you would be really bloated. It's also inflammation. Just being hypothyroid is inflammatory in and of itself. So one of the things when people start to get better with hypothyroidism, whether it's naturally through some modalities or whether it's through thyroid hormone replacement, it doesn't really matter when. But whenever their T3 levels and the things start to work itself out,
Mhm.
often people will just drop, it happened to me too, just drop 10 pounds in a month without doing anything
Wow.
because it's
How
just like
reassuring for
you
somebody.
like dissipate. You're like, you don't even just, because the metabol and you're like suddenly you're more satiated. Suddenly you're able to eat more, you know? the terrible thing about hypothyroidism with the weight gain is it doesn't matter if you restrict calories, you'll gain weight anyway. You could literally
Yeah.
starve yourself every day, you'll get fatter and fatter. Isn't
Mm.
that horrific? It is. You have no control over your own body. But what you do have control over is your health and how you decide to go about it. And if you decide to throw it into the hands of a doctor, you're asking for trouble, no
Mhm.
matter who you are. So the general rule of thumb I would say in life is, hey, if you have been diagnosed with a disease of some kind, you better learn all you can about it because
Mhm.
you're going to be your advocate and only you can help your doctor help you if they're uninformed. But if you're not informed and you're going to need a doctor, sometimes you're going to need a doctor. If it doesn't work out naturally, you're going to need a doctor. You don't want to be, ordering your stuff over the internet from other countries, some sketchy ass stuff that I had to do. I don't have to do that anymore, obviously, but like when I was treating myself and, all I had was me, there was a time when I ran out of my thyroid hormones and I didn't have a doctor. This was before my book was published. And
Mm.
I was having a meltdown, and Mexico was out of production and they were the closest place to get it. I had a friend who was born and raised in Mexico and actually happens to be part of a wealthy family. And she had her driver go around to 8 pharmacies in Mexico looking for T3 for me. I was having like a total freak out. They couldn't find it. I didn't know at that point what I was
Mm.
going to do.
Mm.
And then actually it was, I published my book. Clearly was able to get a doctor. No, but found the best doctor, my doctor, Dr. Forsman, the doctor on my book. And I'm sure you read the Q&A in the back.
Yeah,
It's
that
great.
a great Q&A at the
Yeah,
back.
the
Yeah,
Q&A is
really
so worth
thorough.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
like literally, even if you just go to a bookstore and like flip to the Q&A and read that while you're sitting
Yes.
in the bookstore, I think that's all, or send like I'll send you the PDF. Just contact me. I can send you the PDF of the actual Q&A. Um,
Yeah.
invaluable is finally I found a doctor who knew what I knew through his own investigation. So I
Mm.
didn't have to teach him or train him, and now I have someone that I could bounce something off if I needed to, although I don't. I manage my own thyroid stuff on half for years.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have had to do this by myself. So save yourself the 7 years that I can't get back by not just going, I don't know, because I understand your general malaise, you're depressed, it's exhausting, you're exhausted, you don't have energy, you want to take a nap every day. It's barely all you have just to do laundry and make dinner that day. It's hard to go fight for yourself. You just want to keep calling doctors and visiting them and hoping they're going to give you the answer. And a lot of them are steering in the wrong direction. I've had so many people call me who've been like, I've been following you for 3 years, but I'm like, what have you been doing for 3 years? You're still not better? Like, why did it take you 3 years? I get that because again, it's this general malaise. It's a feeling of you need to help yourself, but you also can't get off your ass to do it, but you need to
Mhm.
do it. It's a strange conundrum that if you're in it, you understand. But I'm here to say you have to do this. I'd
Yeah.
be dead right now if I didn't do this for myself and maybe lots of other thousands and thousands of people all over the world. But I'm here to teach you everything you need to know in layman's terms so that then you can take that knowledge and go save yourself. Because if you get a great doctor today, what if they move? What if they retire? You're going to need to understand this quote problem you have.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's temporary, right? Like you fix it. But with someone like me, where like, okay, well, this is how it is, then I, thank God, know how to manage it. Thank
Yeah.
God I understand what I need and how to do it and how to look at my like I understand it. So that's what I offer everyone is that knowledge and education. And then of course, if you're a doctor, if you're an MD or a practitioner, then yeah, you want to come and learn from me too. And if you go to ultimatethyroidcourse.com, you can just scan the page and you'll see all of the MDs that are like, I had no idea, we never learned this. Thank you so much.
Mm. And I love that. I love that
Yeah.
how doctors are coming to you to learn from you. It's such a it's a lot of reassurance that yes, you've done an amazing thing,
Vindication a
and
little
it's an
bit. Yeah.
indication. It's kind of like yes, um,
I found the best doctor in the
mm,
whole world, Dr. Forsman, who's also on my book and is a wonderful practicing doctor and who is amazing and is helping me through an area I'm not an expert in, which is menopause, which
mm,
I'm sailing through because of him. So I have him as the expert in that to biohack. So I feel like everything that I went through to suffer for this, I did get back in the form of like one of the best doctors I could have ever found, and as well, the ability to help other people. Because damn it, it's like if I can prevent one person from wasting all of that time, and believe
mhm,
me, it's so much wasted time. And if they just, because this actually can be quite quick, what I'd like to share with everyone is that most thyroid issues, short of having horrifically high antibodies in like the thousands, you can literally fix almost any thyroid problem in 3, 4 months max.
And you say that you can be completely symptom free. Does that go for
Oh, yeah,
everybody with the
100%.
thyroid issues, like
That does.
regardless of age or how long you've had it or severity?
Yes, it does, and I'm so glad you brought that
Oh
up.
my
This
God,
is this
that's
is not like a
amazing.
selling point that I'm like, "Hey, I just want to sell you this bill of goods." No, literally, that's what you're actually going for is the full elimination of symptoms. And here's the
Yes.
thing. So if you're with a doctor that doesn't know this, but they know some of it, so there's people on thyroid hormone replacement who are like, well, I feel better than before, but I'm still like can't lose weight, or I still, right, they're still subpar perhaps, but they're just like, I don't know, I take this pill every day because they don't know what they're taking. They don't, yeah, but they're just like, okay. In those scenarios, they'll go to the doctor, be like, I'm depressed, or I'm having, and the doctor, who's the dumb, uninformed doctor, goes and knows that the list of symptoms, like, oh, depression. So they'll be like, oh, well, you're depressed. Well, you have hypothyroid. No, 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 no. That's a doctor who does not know how to treat you in such a way that does eliminate all of your symptoms. And they're just too afraid to fricking admit it. And they don't know any better. So they're like, well, I guess the symptom's lingering because it's a part of hypothyroidism. Let's make it very clear. I would go into a doctor's office tomorrow if it were a new doctor's office. I would put down hypothyroidism. I have no symptoms. I'm symptom free. That is the goal. Everybody can reach it. Now,
Mm.
what takes longer? Hashimoto's, the autoimmune form that affects thyroid. That can take longer if people's antibodies are out of control because they still might have some lingering symptoms from the antibodies. They might need to do dietary stuff and or other interventions and modalities available to the Hashimoto's people that could take some time for that autoimmune response to lower and lower and lower. But you can, in fact, had a client the other day who finally is not detectable at all for Hashimoto's and once had them in the hundreds. I mean, like we're talking like 300s, 400s, and now it's like undetectable, not even within the range, just shows up as a less than, don't have it. So that is absolutely possible. It's also the goal of people with any autoimmune disorder, but particularly Hashimoto's. That's your goal, is to get it to lowest as possible or undetectable. So people with high antibodies and hypothyroidism issues, that might take longer, but here's what will happen still within that 3, 4 months. If you're doing it the right way, you'll be feeling better as every single day goes by. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how it works. It's not
Yes.
like, oh, and then 3 months and you feel great. It's like, oh, hey, oh, okay, okay. Because you're usually either, if it's a natural way, then your T3 is naturally climbing. And if you're doing thyroid hormone replacement, you always do entry level dose and you tinker as needed for that particular person. And there's where that 3, 4 months comes in. Because you're going to take the thyroid home and get tested 3 weeks later. The blood comes back in a week. Now we're at a month. Boom. We gotta you gotta climb up the ladder to your optimal dose. And most of the doctors who are out there make the mistake that I write about in my book, a mistake that patients and doctors make, which is waiting too long to retest when someone has taken the entry level thyroid dose. They'll be like, oh, here's some thyroid, and we'll see you in 6 months. Oh my God,
Mhm.
they could be feeling more hypothyroid than they were before they walked into that doctor's office because now they've introduced exogenous hormones. If it's not enough or the right combination, now they've shut down the whole feedback loop. And then they're like, this whole thing doesn't work. This stuff doesn't work. Thyroid hormone's horrible. It made me feel awful. Can't tell you how many people have come to me being like, thyroid hormone's horrible. I don't want it. It made me feel awful. It was terrible. Doesn't work for me. I'm like, well, what do you mean by it doesn't work for me? You see how people just throw out
Mm.
comments and you're like, well, what? And they don't even know what the tests were, what their levels were, or anything else. So it is it's a tricky scenario. You need to be with someone who understands that, but that's how you, it's not aggressive. It's just that's how you smartly climb up the ladder. So you can really achieve this within 3 to 4 months. Caveat being, if someone had very high antibodies, they may take a little bit longer to come down and can still cause some symptoms, but everything else would be getting better, if that makes
Mm.
sense. I hope everything there I said made sense. I
It
know it's a
does.
lot. I
It
know it's
does. And it just, it kind of, it enhances the fact that anybody going through this, they do need some sort of guide. And your book is a good guide. So if somebody has all the symptoms and they're just wondering if they even have it, because I have to say, so many people come to me saying, oh, I have this problem. I think it's my thyroid. I think it's my thyroid. But like you said, people don't then take that next step to actually find out. for real if they've actually got it. So, what labs should they be demanding when they go into the doctor's office? And I say demand because that it kind of feels like that. Like you kind of have to give them this list and persuade them to do these labs. So, what labs should we be asking for?
So before I tell you what labs you should get, anyone listening that has struggled with thyroid or is on thyroid hormone replacement or whatever, if you're not feeling freaking awesome and young and energetic and all that, then I want you to go back to your labs. And I would bet you probably $1 million that your doctor only tested two of the things that I'm going to be mentioning. And I would be willing to bet that the things that they tested were either they only tested the TSH or they only tested TSH and T4. I
Correct. Yeah.
guarantee you they weren't going to be testing the rest of the labs that I'm going to mention.
Yeah, that was
Um,
my experience, definitely. Yeah.
and by the way, everyone can go to freethyroidguide.com. List of tests is there, questions to ask a doctor's office, all sorts of quick tips on just like how do I get started with figuring out whether I have this problem. So the 6 labs that I'm going to give you, and there's some related ones like iron and B12 and stuff. You can go to my free thyroid guide for that. But I just want to focus on 6 thyroid tests that are do I or do I not have a problem? What is happening with my thyroid, particularly hypothyroidism? Okay, these aren't tests for hyperthyroidism. Although I would be able to detect hyperthyroidism through looking at someone's labs that I'm going to mention, and then I would ask them to go get further labs. So you'd still be able to detect it, but it's not the direct test for hyper. So this is for hypothyroidism. Um, TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. But that's the test that, you don't ever judge solely on that. That's a whole long discussion, but TSH. Free T3. Free is in freedom. Free T3, free T4. And then this is the one every doctor is going to question and push you on. Reverse T3. I'm
Mm,
going to repeat them again. These are the core 4, and then I'm going to give you the 2 antibody tests because you do want to know whether you have Hashimoto's or not, because there are different modalities, different dietary strategies, all sorts of things that can help you get those antibodies down and fix that. Versus standard hypothyroidism like I have. I don't have the autoimmune form, so those things aren't applicable to me nor really available, right? But okay, so 4 tests, main ones: TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3. The antibody test. First one, TPO, it stands for thyroid peroxidase antibody. Second one, TG antibody, stands for thyroglobulin. Now, most doctors only think that there's one of these tests. They usually only test the TPO. You need
mm,
to test both because you could be positive for both or one or the other. It's important to know. You could be missing something. So, those are the 6. What's my issue? Do I even have a problem? Okay, now testing. Never ever get tested in the afternoon, after eating, whatever. It's always within 2 to 3 hours after waking up fasted. You can have black coffee, you can have black tea, you can have water. It's fine. But you don't take anything else, including thyroid hormone replacement. So if you've been on thyroid hormone replacement and you're listening, especially if you take anything with T3 in it, and your doctor has had you take your pills before the test, you are being mistreated by your doctor. Likely you don't
mm,
feel well because they're looking at what just got sent coursing through your veins 2 hours ago, not
mm.
what is free, unbound, and available, which is free T3. So I want to give you that nuance. That's why now, if you're on T4 only as a thyroid hormone replacement, it's not as important that you take or don't take your medication before the test. But everyone else, and I say hormones, it's really not medication, it's just hormones. Um, so you never take them before the test. Always get tested in the morning, 2 to 3 hours after waking. Even if like you're on the night shift and you have some weird schedule. I know a fellow podcaster who doesn't eat lunch till like, or sorry, who doesn't eat dinner until like midnight. Okay, so they have, but for them it's the same thing. It's just within 2 to 3 hours, and those are going to give you the most accurate results. And from there, you're able. I mean, again, you need to a little bit know about what's here and what's there. Just because something is within range doesn't mean it's optimal, and that's
Mm.
where you have the doctors discount people. So I can't even count how many times someone has said to me, "Oh no, my doctor tested my thyroid. It's fine." I go, "Well, how do you know?" Well, I mean, I go, did they test free T3? Yeah, I'm sure they did. Okay, well, you know what? How about this? How about I don't believe it. So go back and look and tell me. And it's always that they didn't test it. Okay. Like I'm
Right.
never wrong about this because
Mm.
it's always someone suffering. And if the doctor knew what they were doing, the person wouldn't be complaining to me. We wouldn't be having the conversation. So
Why
I
don't they
know they got
test
it wrong.
it? Why don't they test it? Is it that they just don't know that it's
They
important?
just weren't taught it and it's their belief system. They just
They
weren't
believe
taught
T4
it.
is the only one, is the most important, and that's all you need to test.
That's what you need to test, and that's
Mm.
the only hormone you give to people, and they
Yeah.
just don't get it. It's basically a 1973
And
way of looking
would
at
they not
thyroid health.
change that though? Like with everything that's coming out and all the work that you're doing and all the doctors that are coming out now, are they
Oh,
not
we
going to
would hope
change
so,
that?
but no, not with like the Endocrinology Association. And also,
Oh,
if you have a pill that's very popular that all the endocrinologists say this is your answer for hypothyroidism, you're not going to have a medical study done at Stanford or some big university because the T4 people are going to withdraw their donation to the university if something adverse against them is being studied. I mean, that
oh,
happens too. So
mm,
the amount of research that can be done into the various different combos, I mean, there's enough research to the point where I remember I did this to a doctor, an uninformed doctor once many years ago. I pulled out the literature from Pfizer, the manufacturer of T3, which stated in its own literature, hey, this can be used if someone can't convert T4 to like to prove to the doctor that this was and like they still were like, what? And I was like, oh my God, you won't even like you're a doctor. And this is a pharmaceutical company, one of the best pharmaceutical companies in the world. I'm showing you their own literature. That's how indoctrinated they are. So the way that
wow.
Dr. Forsman describes it in the back of my book, because I'm like, how did you not know? And he goes, listen, he goes, it's just not what you're taught. And endocrinologists are the most indoctrinated because it's this idea of how could I have gone to school for 10 years at Harvard and paid all this money and not learned everything I needed to know. But the problem is then a doctor like Dr. Forsman will have a patient working with an endocrinologist, and my doctor will request like more tests, and the endocrinologist gets offended because they
Mm,
probably don't know what the tests are. So this is an ego game that's real stupid. Okay.
yeah. And it's costing people their,
It's
their
costing people
livelihood.
their
Yeah.
lives. I had a doctor, I went to a famous story I tell in my book. I went with a not very good English speaking patient,
Mm,
like someone who'd worked with our company, to an endocrinologist. The endocrinologist was horrific. She didn't even ask the patient anything, look her in the eyes, ask her anything about her symptoms, like nothing. I was already horrified. We were like 2 minutes into this, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be rough. So I said, hey, can you test this patient's free T3 and reverse T3? And she goes, reverse T3, we don't test that. That's old school. And I said, well, okay. I said, hold on a second. I said, well, I actually personally, as like a human being in this world, just overcame a horrific reverse T3 issue. So it's new school to me. And also, I'm just asking you to take a test. That's all I'm asking. I'm just asking you to take one test. And then she says this. She goes, well, fine, but I don't know how to evaluate it. That sent, I almost wanted to throw something across the room. I said, did you just patronize me for asking you about a test you are now telling me you know nothing about? Do you see how gaslighting, crazy making,
mm.
horrific that is? By the way, guess who had a reverse T3 problem? Surprise, surprise, the patient.
Wow.
We don't test that. That's old school. Just, I don't know what it is. I don't know what some chicken here is challenging my doctor. I don't
And
even know
that's
what it
what
is.
people are
That's
up
literally, you know what?
against.
Let me just synonymously tell you what that's about. That's me saying, oh my God, girl, do not go see the new Star Wars movie. And you say, oh gosh, was it bad? And I go, I don't know, I didn't see it.
That's what people are up against, though. Like, this is why it's so difficult for people to walk into the office. I mean, I've just booked an appointment for my
It
husband. Like,
is.
just
You have to fight with them.
reading all your stuff. I just thought, I'm interested about my husband at the moment. I'm just kind of like, okay, maybe we just need to get him checked. And I'm already feeling a bit nervous about, I'm going to write down all the tests, and I'm feeling nervous for him to actually ask those tests. It's such a crazy thing. And I was reading something online. So in the UK, they prescribe T4, but it's very hard to get T3 out of them. I don't know if it's the
Mhm.
same in the US, but and I
Yeah, a
I
little easier now, but it is actually worse than the UK. And by the way, for anyone in the
seriously, my
UK,
gosh, I typed in why that could be, and apparently it's because the cost of the drug, the cost of T3.
so cheap.
And then your book said it's to do with the fact that they're so sold on T4, they can't backtrack now and say it's about T3. So it's really about money and about kind of keeping up appearances
And
and
it's about the fact that they're not looking outside of what they know. They're not being challenged. They've got 10 minutes a patient. Do you need surgery
that's
or a
right.
pill?
Yeah.
Move on. I don't have time to look into your B12 and your bullshit. That's for, they don't think about supplements. I had a doctor laugh at me when I asked him to test my B12. And I was so emotionally weak because I was hypothyroid at the time. You don't
Mm,
have a lot of confidence or wherewithal when you're sick. And I was so offended. I started crying. I go, you know what? I'm just asking you to take a test. Guess who had a B12 deficiency? Shocker, right? I mean, like he patronized me. That's the doctor I ran into at the store.
right.
Oh, I had another one that happened to me recently. I talk smack about a doctor in my book who I had a reverse T3 problem. I knew what it was. I went to her. I'm like, hey, here's what this thing is. And she threw her hands up and she goes, oh, this is too complicated.
Yeah, I read that part.
And that was the second time in a decade I was in a parking lot outside of a doctor's office, bawling my eyes out, realizing I was on my own again. And this time now even worse because
Mm,
less people knew about reverse T3, right? And I ran into her in my neighborhood recently and had a frickin' meltdown. I hadn't seen her in like 15 years. She was at a local deli. She recognized, I've also sent people to her with a warning, like she knows this much, but not this far. But if you need someone who can get you there, right? Like caveats, but she knows about me. She knows my book. And she's like, oh, hey. And I'm just, it was polite and everything and blah, blah, blah. And then I left and I came home and it was like seeing that other doctor and I lost it, had to call my fellow coach friends and work it out.
it's
It was
trauma.
rough. Now, one of my best friends, that's her doctor. So it's not like I don't hear about this woman or her name or understand that she's in the world anymore and just saw her 15 years later. It was really seeing her face to face. The
Mm,
last time I saw her face to face, I stripped down in her office. I had gotten so fat again, second bout of hypothyroidism, that my bra looked like a Playboy Playmate triangle over the nipple bikini. That's how fat I had gotten. I'm standing there and I'm like, look at me. I am exploding. I'm bloated. My hair is falling out. And she threw her hands up and said, this is too complicated. And I said, oh, so organic chemistry tests on the MCAT weren't complicated? Are you kidding me?
mm,
Didn't offer me a recommendation, didn't offer to go. I mean, again, I'm still going to get charged up and passionate because my claws are out for all of you out there and for all of the people. But hey, it hit me too. I still had some work to clean up, obviously, about her.
mm,
It was tough because you know what it did? And this happens to me all the time, and it's okay because I'm on the other side of it now. And that's the beauty about fixing hypothyroidism is the contrast that you will always be so grateful and happy about your health because a lot of people have never experienced what it's like to have that chronic issue. And life is so much better. It's almost like a gift to have been
mm,
down and then get out of it. You know what I
yeah.
mean? But yeah, it's so rough in all of these ways. It breaks up families. The guy's like, this isn't the woman I married, and she's going to 50 doctors. Something's wrong with her. There must be a hypochondriac. Nothing's working. Oh, do we have something we don't know now? Now I'm worried. Does she like this is a problem?
Mm,
You get adrenal fatigue when you're hypothyroid for too long because your adrenals overcompensate for the lack of energy. And then you're sensitive to light, sound, and smells. And it's now you're really no fun to be around because everything's annoying you. I mean, what it does is it's a domino effect that has a cascade of a multitude of 30 to 40, 50 symptoms that any dumb doctor will try to be treating the symptom without getting to the root. And that might sound cliche, but the thyroid's like the root of all roots.
when it comes to someone who's on T4 medication and they still feel shit, um, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that they go back to their doctor and they have those specific lab
Yeah. Oh,
tests
absolutely.
and
Just you
that
have to go
they
get the test.
right,
Yeah.
okay, and then they would have to obviously, be guided and kind of figure out what to do next. Maybe they might need a T3 on top of that, on top of their T4 or
Well, here's the thing. There's so many nuances to that. It's so
mm,
individual. It's why I remember someone online one time was like, "Why don't you just give us all the answers?" And I'm like, "Because it like that's why my course is 20 hours on the thyroid, like because there's gut digestion, there's so many things involving this. But here's the thing. It may be reducing the T4, adding the T3. It may be
Mm,
just adjusting the timing of the doses. It may be splitting it. Are you giving too much T4 in one dose? Does it need to be split and added with T3? Do you need to remove it altogether and the person has to go on T3 only? There are so many different options for thyroid hormone replacement. You have T4 only being the one that usually fails people, but can still work.
yeah.
T4 T3 combo, usually the most endocrine mimicry. And then you have uh, T3 only. And
Mm.
T3 only is the last resort,
And
but
is
it's a
that what you're
lifesaver.
on? Are you still
Mostly. I take
okay?
very little. Yeah, I was on T3 only strictly for about 10 years, and now I take a tiny bit of T4 in the morning with T3 and then T3 a second time in the day. And my dose and everything has adjusted over time. I used to be
Mm,
on natural desiccated thyroid, Armour thyroid back in the day. So I can't take too much T4. So again, it really depends on the situation and the person and their labs. I do offer 15-minute clarity calls where people could just be like, here's my labs, what's the story? And I'd be like, here's the deal, and here are your options. And you know what I mean?
mm,
And you can go from there just to get a sense. Reverse T3 is critical and is often missed. And because people realize that free T3, free T4, and TSH are a great trifecta, if you don't rule out the reverse T3 problem and you give someone more T4, you're hurting them.
mm.
You're hurting them because you're not informed enough to know better. I had a doctor recommend that to me during the time I was going through a reverse T3 problem. They were like, well, we just need to give you more of this. And I go, are you kidding me? You just
Yeah.
suggested making me more hypo, making me more sick, and hurting me. What the fuck? If anyone wants to unconfuse themselves, because reading it usually doesn't do it, especially if you're hypo, I have a very low cost thyroid masterclass that is just
Mm.
like a 2.5 hour tutorial, me showing you labs, explaining this stuff to you. So just go to ellruss.com, click on, courses and master classes, and just do that if you want like the full tutorial of the whole thyroid feedback loop. When people just see stuff online and at different websites, it's so confusing. And I remember
So
being there too. It's
confusing.
actually really easy. The bottom line is that this system is so elegant. T3 is so powerful. It's the fat burner, it's the brain igniter. It also could speed up your heart rate and be dangerous, like she just told you earlier happened to her back in the day. And so, our body has this kind of slow release mechanism, if you will. And it takes one hormone called T4, which is useless on its own, completely useless. But its job is to kind of like store up, and as you need it, it kind of sparks into the metabolic fire, life giving T3. But
Mm,
if it's not converting into that, that's a problem. It could not convert at all. It could convert and convert not into enough, or it can convert into something called reverse T3, the inactive form. But I don't want to confuse people and make people feel confused. When I explain this through my masterclass, it's so clear and you can watch it over and I repeat it and you really kind of understand it. Um, T4, T3, reverse T3, I could say yellow, orange, blue, red. Wouldn't matter. Don't get thrown off by free T3, TSH. That sounds medical, sciencey, whatever. Don't. It literally could be blue, red, green, and yellow. If I could do
mhm.
my whole thyroid tutorial on that with
Right.
colors. So that's how easy it is to understand. So get into the thyroid masterclass if you want the full tutorial. But that's why if you're on too much T4, well, here's the thing. If you're not testing the T3, then you're not testing what matters. And that's
Right.
why I said earlier, if you're with an uninformed doctor, they've only tested TSH and T4. They've not tested the thing that T4 converts into, the life-giving thing, the thing that's the reason you're burning fat or not, your heart rate's high or low, you're warm or cold. And
Mm,
they're not testing, did it convert into the thing that matters? And that's why the endocrinologists miss it and people get sick on T4 and then they have to go searching outside the box. And, I have a success story in my first book, Kara, who had two miscarriages because of this. She was on T4,
mm.
treated for hypothyroidism, but then she started to get fat. She started to die, and like things were happening, and she was like, "What's going on?" And she had a couple miscarriages, and they're like, "Your thyroid's fine." They told her, "Your thyroid's fine." Just they said, what they say? She goes, not what they said to me. Oh, he accused her of having a closet eating disorder, which happens a
Oh
lot. They'll kind of
gosh.
be like, maybe you need to eat less. And she was like, I've been training for a marathon with all the energy I have. What are you talking about?
Poor
So
thing.
in her situation, they never tested T4. I made her that same bet I made here. And she went back and looked at 8 years of doctors and they only tested TSH and T4. Wrong.
Mm,
Trouble. Run. You're with the dum dum. They're uninformed. You either inform them and teach them and work with them, or you find someone who gets it.
Mm,
And so she was on T4 only, and then she got put on a T3 to T4 combination, and she's been great ever since. But she wasn't able to be a mother. And there are lots of
mm,
regrets like that. I've talked with people that had hysterectomies that they didn't need to have, people whose
mm.
thyroid glands were removed that didn't need to be. So don't let any like closing lessons, don't let anyone take a part of your body out without like three or four opinions. Okay, well, no matter what it is, your gland, your insides, your ovaries, I don't care. You gotta like don't let them take that. uh
When it comes to supplementation and just general nutrition guidelines, I know it's huge and you talk about it in your book, but is there anything specific that you think just like a snapshot that someone can
yeah.
take away with them?
Well, you can always go to ellruss.com/faves, like FAVS. But like in the first part, there's supplements and there is a thyroid support formula in there. And you can always like turn it around and, or like click on it, see what's in it and find your own best brand. I like pure encapsulations. So thyroid
Mhm.
support formula has some good nutrients that help the thyroid. A great multivitamin is good. Knowing your MTHFR mutation and whether you need a methyl B12 folate is key. Do you have heavy metals? Okay, you may not be able to detox from them while you're hypothyroid though. So there's that. Selenium, very key. Oh, I eat 2 Brazil nuts a day. It won't do it. I'm just telling
I
you right
was
now, it won't
wondering
do
about
it.
that. Like, is that seriously effective?
It's not.
No.
Okay, it's
Okay,
not. It's also
okay.
very hard to keep Brazil nuts fresh. Trust me, you really need to take the 200, right? And talk with your doctor, obviously, but you
Mm,
want, 200
the actual
micrograms at least a
supplement.
day. Yeah, and pure encapsulations also makes a great multivitamin. You want proper vitamin D levels, right? In a scale of 10 to 130, you want to be between 70 and 90 with vitamin D3. So, like, these are important nutrients. You need to check into iron panels. These are also in my free thyroid guide, or these other sort of supplemental tests to go, well, where am I here? Because most people who are hypothyroid become extremely deficient in iron. No matter if you're eating chicken liver every day, wouldn't matter. You could be eating raw meat. You'll still become deficient in iron. Your body will not be able to hold on to that nutrient. And you are also likely going to become very low in vitamin D. So there are some things you could be like, hey, let's work on these, let's up these levels. Obviously, I believe in a paleo ancestral lifestyle. If you have Hashimoto's, the last thing I'll say, and we didn't talk about it here, but I talk about it a lot and in my master class, which is um, gluten ignites Hashimoto's antibodies, period. So you don't have to go full paleo grain free, although I do suggest it, but you got to go gluten free.
Hmm.
Sometimes quitting gluten will just knock the antibodies down and keep you from ever even going on thyroid hormone replacement. I've seen that
Right.
so many times where antibodies are out of control, they're feeling all the symptoms, but their thyroid levels are pretty good, but the antibodies, and you're like, have you been eating gluten? They're like, oh my God, I've been eating pizza a lot. And you're like, okay, you know what? And then 3 weeks later, they're like, oh my God, I feel like a new person. And you're like, there's your answer. Gluten
Right.
free for you. And sometimes it's that simple.
Yeah, just
Sometimes
that
people are having
one big step.
hypothyroid symptoms and it's just iron. I've fixed a person with just like suggesting iron. It was like all they needed. They thought they had a big thyroid problem because they had brain fog. It was like,
Mhm.
yeah, you got deficient. You're a menstruating female your whole life. You had this. We went through a surgery. Like, sometimes it's simple and easy, and sometimes it's just nutrients and strategy. Obviously, always try that first because if you do the nutrient optimization and you do the dietary strategies, then what you're doing is at least priming your body the best you can, even though you're in a disease state that's inflammatory and shitty metabolism, but at least you're starting somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that if it doesn't work and you do have to take thyroid hormones, then at least you've sort of primed yourself to be able to receive them and have them be metabolized the best that they can be.
Mhm. Oh, it's just been so informative. And I feel like anybody who thinks that they could have a thyroid problem or they do have a thyroid problem and it's just their medications aren't working, I feel like they've got a really good first step to,
Yeah.
on their journey. And I mean, how obviously people are going to be wanting to know after this, how to reach you, where to follow you. So what are the best ways people can contact you or follow you?
So I'm most active, I think, on Instagram. It's really
Mm,
where I'm kind of am all the time, and you can DM me there, and you can just go to ellruss.com and click on thyroid
mm,
help. Just click on the
mhm,
tab, and it gives you all the ways. Like, oh, here's the masterclass. Here's the main course. Do you really need to dive into that, or are you a practitioner where you're a doctor and you're like, I need to take the whole course because I need to hear from also the doctor and the other experts, or do you just need like my free thyroid guide? Sometimes it's just that. Sometimes
mm,
it's like the master class is like all anyone needed, and they're like, thanks very much. That had what I needed. So it's all levels of what you need. You don't have to take my 20-hour thyroid course if you're not there, right? But you may need
mhm.
it too. So I sort of offer all of the levels of education. And then, of course, there's my book. And hey, what's free is interviews of me. You can go to my website and click on the, interviews of Elle tab and just click on some of the ones we put up there for thyroid and confidence and just click on the thyroid ones and,
Okay.
just start to learn it. But if you really want to just get a direct shot, get my free thyroid guide first. If that doesn't do it for you, then really get into my thyroid masterclass. It's on your own time where you can rewatch and watch the video of me. You can see before and after photos of me in bikinis and stuff, like exactly how this affected my body. You're going to hear some testimonials, some
Mm.
great testimonials, and you'll hear them on my website when you even go to free thyroid guide or any of these things. You can hear, listen, and read testimonials. So um, yeah, I've been doing it for, let's see, well over a decade now. Like, yeah, a few years over a decade and 20 plus countries at this point. It's the same everywhere from Cyprus to Australia. Like, it just doesn't matter. The uninformed doctor is the BS. And actually, in some countries, they don't even offer T3. Horrific. Like, I talked to
Wow.
Turkey, I talked to someone in Turkey or somewhere, and they're like, I can't even get it. I'm like, can you go to a neighboring country? They're like, that's what I'm going to have to do.
Oh gosh.
I
God,
know.
I
It's
feel
so
like that.
dumb because it's just such an
Yeah,
easy, cheap,
I just feel
stupid
like
thing.
there's still a long way for the medical system to go. Like it's still got a long way to go. But are you hopeful, Elle, about the future?
You know what? I am since my book came out and others have
Yeah.
followed suit. And look, while I might be one of the OGs of it, you do have to vet your experts wisely because people have realized since my book came out and everything else what a big problem this is. And they've been on the social media and everyone's a thyroid expert. So you've got to vet your experts wisely. I've had people call me and go, hey, did you hear about this? No, celery juice is not going to cure your hyperthyroidism like the medical medium says in his book, right? But like people will call me about stuff like that. Um, and so just vet your experts wisely, read all the stuff you can. The two people that I recommend others, and I'm a best-selling thyroid author, and there's only two other people I would probably call if like like I can't imagine not being able to figure something out for myself, but let's just say I was stumped. I would call Janie Bolthorpe, who helped me very early on, uh, 20 years ago, and she has a website called Stop the Thyroid Madness, one of the
Mm.
best websites for thyroid health ever. And then also in the UK, talking about reverse T3 and T3 issues, Paul Robinson wrote a book called Recovering with T3, and he also wrote a few other books. Those are two fellow thyroid patients, same story as me, who are older than me, whose books came before mine, who I look up to and recommend, and I don't really recommend anyone else but them.
Well, Elle, thank you so much. That was just a
Thank
fabulous
you.
conversation. I could literally listen to you all day because
Uh-oh.
I could just
Hey,
because there's so much information and
it is a
it's
lot. It's
totally
a lot.
relatable and entertaining. So, thank you so much, and I
Thank
hope we
you.
get to chat again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. And for everyone else out there, just like keep the faith. It's absolutely fixable. All of it's manageable, fixable, solvable. Just hang in there.